صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء. ما خاب من تمسك بكم ولا منا من لجأ إليكم سادتي. يا ليتنا يا ليتنا يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم والقول كالحق وأصدق القائلين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
One of the most important concepts in the religion of Islam and in the science of the soul is a concept called at-tawajjuh. In the Arabic language, the word tawajjuh means to face something. That I am facing the audience at this moment. The audience is facing me. When we speak about this and through the lens of the religion of Islam, the verses of the Holy Quran and the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhi salatu wassalam, when we talk about this concept or this notion of at-tawajjuh, we do not say physically facing something, but rather we speak about a very important concept, and this is the concept of the heart. As we mentioned yesterday, that within the human heart, there is a light what is known as al-fitra. This light is receptive to all things that are virtuous, all things that are sublime, and all things that are beautiful. The school of Ahlul Bayt, through the traditions and through the teachings of the Imams, have taught us, and of course through the verses of the Holy Quran, have spoken about the importance of this particular spiritual entity known as the human heart. For whenever we talk about the concept of the heart, we do not speak about the heart as a physical entity. The heart is not something physical when we speak about it in the Holy Quran or in the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt. The heart is not something physical, meaning that it is not something that we speak about as a organ within the human body. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran, for example, في قلوبهم مرضا فزادهم الله مرضا, that in the hearts of the people is a disease, and we increase that disease. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this verse, for example, He is not saying that this heart within the human body has high cholesterol or heart disease or so on. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about the heart in its spiritual nature, meaning that the human heart is a spiritual entity. According to the scholars of ethics, they state what? That the heart is that spiritual entity which fluctuates between the human soul and the human spirit. The soul is that which commands people to evil, an-nafsul amarata bis-su. We know that the soul inclines or is inclined toward the dunya. It is inclined toward lust, and it is inclined toward overeating and sinning and so on. You see, on the flip side, the human being is also created with what is known as a spiritual nature. We go ahead and we see that the heart is between these two. That the heart, sometimes it pushes towards its nafs al-amarata bis-su, moving toward evil. While on the flip side, often it goes toward its spiritual nature. The important thing is that if the soul has created a strong foundation, whereby itself is always marginalizing evil and always aspiring good, then the heart which lies upon the soul, it moves toward the spiritual nature, which leads us to getting toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see that this concept in Islamic spirituality known as at-tawajjuh does not mean to physically face somebody or physically face something, but rather what it means is facing with the heart. that if we direct this particular spiritual entity within our body toward that which is good and toward that which is virtuous and are receptive to everything in that, that is what is known as spiritual transmission. Let me explain this point. We have a particular dua which is mustahab, which is highly recommended to recite before we begin our prayers. What do we say? And many of us, we know when we recite this dua, for it is the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. What do we say? إِنِّي وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِي وَسَلَّمْتُ أَمْرِي لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. That I have turned myself toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this creator, He's the creator of the heavens and He's the creator of the earth. And I have turned my heart in this direction in the same way that Ibrahim turned to be, as we call him, the father of monotheism. The word that we use in this particular dua, we say, Inni wajjahtu wajhi. That I have faced my face toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On one very basic level, we can state what? That our faces are turned toward the Qibla. Before we begin and we recite Takbirat al-Ihram, we are told to recite this dua after reciting the Iqamah. We're turning toward Qibla. We're turning toward the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On one basic level, we can understand it like this. But the ones who truly understand the inner meaning behind this dua, we say that it is not only turning our physical body toward a physical entity in the Holy Kaaba, but rather I have turned my heart and I have transmitted my heart to the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves it to be turned toward. Meaning, toward Him, of course. Not physically, but spiritually. This concept of at-tawajjuh, or spiritual transmission, as some of the scholars would translate it into, is not only in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course everything leads toward that, but often if we fixate our hearts on one specific thing at any particular moment, we will begin to seek, or we will begin to strive to seek those benefits from whatever it is that we aspire. When we love somebody, when we wish to marry somebody, for example, our hearts are fixated on that particular person. We do not see anything except for that particular person. In fact, we begin to see as that person sees. We begin to see from their lens and from their eyes, and so on and so forth. The important concept within the religion of Islam is what? That we take our heart and fixate it on what? On the greatest individuals in the history of humanity, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and his holy progeny, the Ahlul Bayt.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
And when we allow our heart to fixate, to transmit toward that which we love, then truly some remarkable things can take place. We see, firstly, there's a hadith from our sixth Imam. He says that I never say that I am not one of the companions of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam, because I desired for my entire life to have been with him on the plains of Karbala. And then he says, and my Shia should not say that they are not from the companions of Abu Abdullah either. Because why? Because the Shia of Imam Hussain, they allow their hearts to transmit toward Karbala. We send our heart to Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam, and we say that not only physically, but our spiritually and our entire existence, as we mentioned the other day, is sacrificed toward these particular individuals. We see number two. We see the example of some of these great companions of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam. We see the example, for example, of As-Salman al-Muhammadi, this great, wonderful companion who the tradition states that Salman is on the 10th level of Iman out of 10. That he has reached the highest level of understanding and of ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and of his Imam. We see that Salman would always be sitting next to Rasulullah, would always be sitting next to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam every single day at the time of Salat al-Fajr. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would always go, for example, and he would open the door of the mosque perhaps, or he would be the first one to enter into the mosque, Salat al-Fajr. He would begin performing his a'mal, and then he would lead the prayers. we find that the companions, they would always go to the mosque and they would always see Salman sitting and talking to Amir al-Mu'mineen before the prayer, and they said, how come we cannot attain that station? How come he always gets that? So it is said that they said, look, Salman, he probably leaves his house early and gets toward the mosque so we can sit next to Amir al-Mu'mineen. So we better start leaving a little bit early so we can also get advice from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam. So it says that the very next day, they decided that they were going to leave half an hour early. They left half an hour early. They reached half an hour early. They saw Amir al-Mu'mineen, and sitting next to him, Salman. The next day they said, we have to leave an hour early. They left an hour early. They went to the mosque. What do they see? They see Amir al-Mu'mineen sitting next to Salman. They said, there's no way. This is remarkable. They said, we are going to camp outside the house of Salman to see which path he takes, which road he takes. Maybe there's traffic on the other way, so we'll follow him. So it is said that that night they went and they slept outside the house of Salman. They saw that he left the house. He went, through the way of the forests, and he reached the mosque. They said, that's it. We are going to leave early and we're going to take the same path. They said that night. They left the night before. And they began taking that same journey as Salman. They were walking through the forest. They kept on tripping. They kept on falling. They said, doesn't matter. We need to go and sit next to Amir al-Mu'mineen. They entered into the masjid, and what do they see? They see Amir al-Mu'mineen next to Salman. They went to him and they said, oh, Salman, you know something. We've been following you. How do you always get this seat next to Amir al-Mu'mineen? We want that more. We want that prestige. He says that I take this way. He said, yeah, we know. We followed you. We fell and we tripped and we cut ourselves and we bruised ourselves. He says, no. He said, I walk that way, number one, because Ali ibn Abi Talib walks that way. And number two, I look to see where are the footsteps of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and I walk in those same footsteps. The moral is what? That you become like the Imam. You try to manifest all of the qualities of the Imam. And if your heart is only surrounded by the Imam of your time, you send your spiritual entity toward your master and see what is going to happen. Similarly, we see the example of Uwais al-Qarani. Uwais al-Qarani is who? Uwais al-Qarani is from Yemen. Where is Rasulullah? Rasulullah is in Medina. Uwais al-Qarani, he always desired to see the Holy Prophet. But for whatever reason, his mother needed her son Uwais to always be present with him. And everyone knows the story. We go and we see that finally his mother allowed Uwais to go toward Medina to go visit Rasulullah. It's said that Uwais got on top of his horse and his mother said, oh my son, I give you permission to go toward Medina to visit Rasulullah in one condition, that you never alight from your horse. You go, you see the face of Rasulullah, and you come back. Where is Uwais al-Qarani? Yemen. Where is Rasulullah? Medina. Imagine the distance. But he was obedient to his mother. He went and he got on the horse, and he went toward Medina. He entered into the city of Medina. He said, where is my master, Rasulullah? They said, oh man, Rasulullah is away. He's not in town. He went out of town. He said, I left from Yemen to come toward Medina to visit Rasulullah, and Rasulullah is not here. It is said that on his journey back, he went back without seeing Rasulullah. The same Uwais al-Qarani is the man, by the way, who we often narrate as the one who, when he heard about what happened to Rasulullah at Uhud after he had broken his teeth, he took a rock and smashed his own teeth. Anyhow, in order to show his grief for what happened to his master. Anyhow, Uwais al-Qarani reaches back home. When Rasulullah arrives back in Medina, he says, who has come and entered into Medina? For I smell the fragrance of paradise coming from Yemen. He said, meaning that this Uwais al-Qarani who came and visited me, he is of those people of paradise. Why? What did he do? What he did was desired to be with his leader. He desired to be with his master. He sent his heart to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Furthermore, we go ahead and we see that in sermon number 12 of An-Nahj al-Balagha, we see that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam has just concluded the Battle of Siffin. And the same Uwais al-Qarani, by the way, was also martyred at the support of Amir al-Mu'mineen at the Battle of Siffin, though he never saw Rasulullah his entire life, and he was upwards of 80 years old in this particular battle. Anyhow, we go ahead and we see that in sermon number 12 of Nahj al-Balagha, Amir al-Mu'mineen is approached by one of his companions. And the battle had just been completed. He said, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen," he said, "my brother, he wished to have been here with you and killed in your way." Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam says, "Was he one of our mawali? Did he love us?" He said, "Yes, he loved you, Amir al-Mu'mineen." Did he support us? And the man said, the brother said, "Yes, he supported us." At this moment, Ali ibn Abi Talib says a very important line. He says, "Then, oh my friend," after he called together all of the contingency of the army, they sat in front of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he said that today there were some people who wished and desired they could have that they could have been with me at this battle, and they wished that they could have been killed in my way. I know their names, and I know their fathers' names, and I know that if they had been before me, I know who they are, and I know of those followers of mine who will come after me, and they were all with us, and they died with us in my tent at this battle." My dear brothers and sisters, congratulations. For we are of those individuals who transmitted, who sent our heart to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. When we talk about this particular Zyarat al-Nahiyya al-Muqaddasa, the most important theme that we need to take from it is taking a look at these words through the eyes of our Imam Hujjat ibn Hassan al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Because we have, as we mentioned, that these words, this particular salutation, was recited by our Imam. And in order for us to get the truth and the reality and the understanding of these particular words, we need to understand it through the perspective of our Imam. That imagine it was Imam al-Mahdi who went and he left wherever he was, and he came and he stood in front of Imam al-Hussein and he began reciting these epic lines. That is something that needs contemplation. But in order for us to understand the ziyarah to its utmost perfection and in terms of its absolute meaning, then we need to be with the Imam when reciting the ziyarah. We need to perform this particular act of at-tawajjuh, sending our heart to the Imam and then letting the Imam recite the ziyarah, so we see through the eyes of the Imam, as we mentioned just now, that when we love someone, we send our heart to that person. Spiritually, we are with them, and we begin to think like them, and we begin to talk like them, and we begin to act like them. If we want to understand Zyarat al-Nahiyya al-Muqaddasa of Imam al-Zaman, then the only true way we can do that, and please understand this, you're not going to hear this very often, but send your heart with the Imam, and allow the Imam to recite the ziyarah, and then you will see those benefits. Because we go ahead and we see so many of these a'mal that we perform. We see, for example, a dua kumail. Everybody recites dua kumail on Thursday. If you don't recite it, you listen to it. If you don't listen to it, you recall one line before you fall asleep. Everyone knows dua kumail. Dua kumail is a dua from Amir al-Mu'mineen that he sent to his companion Kumail ibn Ziyad. When Kumail ibn Ziyad, he recited dua kumail, do you think he attained all of the spiritual benefits of that dua? Absolutely. Why? Because he recited it upon instruction of his master Amir al-Mu'mineen. But how come when we recite dua kumail, we don't feel like our hearts have been cleansed and we've reached this great spiritual stage? Allahumma ij'alni min ahsani abidika nasiban indak wa aqrabihim manzalatan mink. Oh Allah, make me of the greatest slaves of yours and allow me to be the closest in proximity toward you, oh Allah, and we know that Allah accepts all of the dua. How come we don't feel like we've attained any type of proximity? It's because we haven't read the dua through the lens of who it needs to be read through. Similarly, we go ahead and we see so many of these other supplications and so many of the other traditions that, for example, when Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he tells his companion Abu Hamza al-Thamali that you're going to recite this dua on this day of the month of Ramadan and see what's going to happen. We all go, we recite the dua, what happens? Nothing. Why? Because we haven't allowed the heart to be where it belongs. And in order to maximize the ziyarah of الناحية المقدسة, the ziyarah of your imam, the ziyarah of my imam, then what do we need to do? We need to allow the imam to recite the ziyarah, but we need to be standing right by his side. But the question comes before we take a look at these particular lines, which Imam al-Zaman recites in Zyarat al-Nahia, we need to see how we can send our heart to the imam of our time. There's three different ways. The first one, which we wish to briefly talk about, is performing an a'mal for the imam, doing an action for the imam. Give charity for the imam of your time. Recite Quran for the imam. How many of us are going, for example, to the Zyarat of Arba'in? We will walk from Najaf to Karbala, only to say the salutation upon Imam al-Hussein. We know that the one who recites the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein and walks toward his shrine, for as we mentioned, every step he takes is worth 100 Hajj and 100 Umrah and 100 times. What happens if we said that I am going to perform this ziyarah and I will gift it to Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah al-sharif. Not only will the imam get the reward, he doesn't need our reward, but when we perform an a'mal for the imam, we begin to build a link with him. All the time we throw around this very nice phrase, how can we build a relationship with the imam? Build a relationship with the imam. We always talk about this subject. How many of us have applied the teachings? By doing what? By giving a gift to the imam. There's a hadith that states that the one who gives a gift, or give gifts to your neighbors and to your family and to your friends and even to your enemies, for giving a gift builds love between people. What happens if you were to give a gift to the imam of your time? What happens if you were to give a gift to Imam al-Mahdi, the man who your existence is sacrificed for? Wouldn't he love you? Wouldn't he want to repay you? Isn't Ahlul Bayt generous? That when you give something in the way of the imam, when you give something in the way of Ahlul Bayt, isn't Ahlul Bayt going to repay you? Think about it. Even if it means putting in $1. Anything to build this relationship, build this link, to attach yourself to the imam. We go ahead and we see an example. Scholar Allama Amini wrote this most immaculate work, Al-Ghadir, in which he defended Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam in the tradition of the day of Ghadir. We find that after Allama Amini had passed away, his son had a dream. In the dream he saw his father. What did he do? His father, he wrote a book called Al-Ghadir defending Ali ibn Abi Talib. In the son's dream he saw his father. He saw his father walking toward a pond of water. And sitting by that pond was Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen was picking up the water with his own hand, walking toward the scholar and putting it into his mouth. The scholar, he says, Allama Amin, he says, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, I am your slave, I am your servant. Why are you the one serving me water? I should be the one serving you water. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, you defended me in the dunya, you supported me in the dunya, and I've got your back in the akhirah. Do anything that you can for Ahlul Bayt, and see how Ahlul Bayt will be paid. When we talk about the coming or the reappearance of the Imam, we should always be in constant supplication to be what? To be of those people who are just the slaves of Imam Zaman. To be the one to give him water, or to be the one to even clean the dust on his feet. That is an honor. That is an honor. That's the first thing that we need to do in order to understand the true and reap the fruits of reciting this salutation of Imam al-Mahdi. For Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, is build a link with the Imam by means of serving the Imam, by the means of giving anything that you possibly can in the way of the Imam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alihi.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Number two, we see that the second thing that we need to do in order to reach the station, in order to transmit our existence to the Imam of our time, is to be in constant supplication for Imam al-Mahdi. We see a very famous tradition which states, أكثروا الدعاء بتأجيل الفرج فإن ذلك فرجكم. That increase your dua, increase your